Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready.
Welcome back to more Live from the Heartland here for the 14th of January in the year 2023. We just did an interview with Keyshawn Whitehorse, a bull rider, and we had trouble because the planes were grounded out there in Durango and all over.
No kidding. Well,
and we did get him on by audio, and he was in the airport. I'm not sure how it'll work out, but we now are going to continue with our show with an old pal, someone who's been on the show and has had thousands of views over the years, the one and only Dave Meggysey.
Oh,
good morning, David.
Oh, that's me.
How are you? Good to see you.
The one and only Michael James. Yay.
Well, with Damar Hamlin being injured the other day and the world, or a lot of people being riveted to the TV, concerned about him, I called you, we talked, and I said, how about you come on and we'll talk about football.
What I want to do is just first, the audience, Michael, Mike James, Michael and I have longtime friends, 50 years. And when I was playing football, professional football at the St. Louis Cardinals, and we had our training camp was in Lake Forest, Illinois, north of Chicago. And I met up with Mike in Chicago, and it was the first time we connected. And with my friend Rick Sortune, who was a player, a fellow player who's dead now, actually. A very good guy and a union guy all his life. So that's just to say we have been connected for a long time.
I remember the very day when you and Rick Sartoon were walking down Clifton Avenue. He had just been visiting with Peggy Terry, who went on to run for vice president with Eldridge Cleaver on the freedom ticket in '68. So this was around 67, 68. And I remember meeting you and then going down to St. Louis later and being at your house with Dr. Spock and doing a lot of stuff. But, the one thing I want to say about Lake Forest football, we were no powerhouse, but I did play.
And he was a player.
We got to wear the Cardinals' old equipment, like, shirts and T-shirts and jock straps, who knows what. But anyhow, that was my first connect with you. So we go way back. We're close friends. We've done a lot of stuff together. I'll try not to get into all the little stuff today, but let's talk to Damar Hamlin and what that triggered for you, David.
Well, I think that, it triggered again, the game itself, and we maybe because we have some time now, we can really talk a little bit about it. And it was kind of a freak injury, but basically he when he got slammed, his heart stopped and he would be dead. And then the guys really mouth to mouth and pushing on his chip, banging on his chips, got his heart revived, and so he's now I think he left the hospital.
Yeah, he's out of the hospital in Buffalo today.
And so but it was pretty dramatic because they had to cancel the game, because and I think it was really driven by the players and their concern for a fellow player that was on death's door, basically. And then the league finally realized what's going on. The players will not want to play this game, and so they canceled basically the game. So, but I think that it was tragic. But on the other hand, it comes up again what this game is about, and the amount of violence that is central to the game. And maybe we can talk a little bit about the history and how it happened. And but it is a very, very popular game now. It's of the 100 shows last year, top rated shows, 885 of them are NFL football, by the way. So that's a big chunk. And looking at now just the playoffs, there's 130 million hits just about the game, the games that are happening next week or this weekend.
Yeah, so, I would always talk to whenever I've been involved in progressive organizations, and they would always be scheduling meetings during some major sporting event, and I said, "You can't do this. You can't do it." Dave, let me go before we go on to talk about football. I
could be babbling away here. Okay, go ahead.
Let's talk. Both of us are babblers, but we're together and we're doing it on our show. But let's talk about the medical response because there's always people on site. It seems like the NFL have been prepared for this kind of thing. So I'd like to hear your response, and I'll just do a little background. Only one, I think, NFL player actually died, and that was the wide receiver Chuck Hughes. October 1st, 71. Dick Butkus, I guess, of the Bears, was waving frantically. And Chuck Hughes died of a heart attack, a blood clot, I guess, and he's the first and only NFL player.
So that was, let's say, look at it's literally, 50 years ago. So what happened, and so what has, that we can figure out how we can talk about it, but one of the biggest things that happened is in 2005, Bennett Amalo he was a neurologist, and he discovered this disease called CTE. And basically, people knew about him, and it was about boxers hitting in their heads so much. And it's called chronic traumatic encephalopathy. I can't.
Don't worry about it.
No, it's CTE. And so this was the first time that it was identified by a former NFL player, famous player, Mike Webster, who played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Dr. Malo was a professor at the University of Pittsburgh. And he was interested what happened with Mike, and Mike was basically living in his car. He played 15 years with Pittsburgh. And then when they did the autopsy of his brain, Dr. Malo, discovered this disease called CTE. And people knew about it for boxers. And now this was the first time you really saw it in professional football players. And then Dr. Amano went on to study other brains from professional football players, and the same thing that was happening with CTE, and the impact of the hitting basically creates a lot of problems for people. And Dave Duerson, people who know about Dave as a Chicago Bear player, 11 years, and he basically shot himself in his chest so he could have his family recover his brain to see if CTE was in his body, in his brain. And for sure enough, he was. So, but and Dave is really a great guy. I mean, I got to know him, and he was our player rep for the Chicago Bears, and that was one of my teams. And so I got to know Dave, and really great guy, a very smart guy. And then after, this disease came on, he lost it, and then he realized he had to, what his decision was to kill himself, so his brain could be saved by the research people in Harvard and Boston.
Let me add in here, Dave, that you, just so people know, you obviously took a lot of hits playing football. You were played in high school. You were at Syracuse University. You were an All-American. You went.
Yeah, we're national champion teams. Yeah, we were.
And then you played 7 years in the pros,
right.
And then you retired. And you actually had a stroke in the last couple of years. And you are involved in a study at Harvard about brain injuries to football players.
Yes, exactly. And we have, I'm one of the advisors to the study. These are former NFL players, and I'm one of them. And with the union, the NFL Players Association funded the study. It's a 10-year study for $25 million. And it started in 2014. And so, and what the researchers at Harvard, and there's a whole complex of hospitals around Harvard, and Spalding is a major one. They are really looking at the different the consequences of injuries from players, CTE and knee injuries and all that stuff. So it's a major piece because we can now specify and research what is really going on with players now. And certainly when you talk about CTE, CTE basically, or the concussion induced damage to football players' brains, their life expectancy is 10 years less than regular people. So this is research, this real search, that's research that is happening with this study. And so NFL players are 10 times more likely to get dementia than regular people. So it's a very tough game, and it's a very violent game. And on the positive side, of course, now, and it was triggered, basically, we can talk a little bit about how the league was denying any consequence of brain damage to players. And finally, they settled $1 billion. And there were 4,400 players were plaintiffs of this lawsuit. And so typically this is what happens, when the lawsuits became because of smoking. That's kind of an analogy of what happened, really. And so players are getting some money now, and a lot of them are pretty damaged because of the concussion, the hits, and the brain damage that happens by playing professional football and college football and high school as well.
Dave, let me, I got to go to, I think, two National Football League Players Association conventions with you.
Right.
One in Phoenix or Tucson, and then one in LA.
Yes.
And I also went to a meeting with you one time of retired players.
Right.
I
remember
was
that, Frank, yeah.
I was amazed about how old these guys looked, how many guys had crutches or a cane.
Glimping around.
And then I saw our friend Dave Zyron the other night on CNN talking about the Hamlin injury. And he said that you told him one time that to be in the NFL means to, I think he said, not have a middle age. You went from young to old.
Exactly. That's it.
I don't know if you remember
good line.
that,
Exactly. Yeah.
I was pretty blown away by seeing all these former, top-notch athletes limping around.
Yeah.
And what are the steps that have been taken by the union? After you played pro ball, you were sort of a hippie in Colorado for a while. Then you were doing construction, and next thing you know, you were a union organizer, organizing the Players Association, and you had a lot of contact with a lot of players. The Bears was one of your teams. What steps has the union taken to deal with the prevention of these industries, or to deal with them as they happen?
Well, maybe I'll see if I can put it together. What we did, and basically what we won, I call it we won the war, 11-year war, to establish free agency. And what that means is when a NFL player, when his contract expires, then he can go to any other team and re-sign again with their former team. And the old days, when I played, there was no free agency, and basically we were called neo-slaves, basically. And if you wanted to play football, you had to go to Canada to play over there because they owned you. Basically, they would draft you from college, and I was from Syracuse. I was drafted, and they had you for life. And so the big struggle that we had to happen, and all the major team sports had to do it, Major League Baseball, the NBA, and the NFL players, all the players, we had to establish free agency. And so that was the biggest thing. So what happens is now the bag of money that is generated in the NFL, put it that, let's say, $20 billion, 50% of that goes for the players, 50% goes to the owners. And what we've done is we chunked out a 25% of our money, the players' money, for services and injury stuff and all the benefits that players get and when they leave the game. And so Gene, our late great leader, Gene Upshaw, basically he knew about players, and he was a 17-year player. And he said, look, you take you say the guys would want to take all the money. Say, no. You're going to get a chunk, and then you're going to have a chunk for your benefits. And so these players now, when they leave the game, they can take care of themselves. And many of these players are injured, not just CTE, but joint injuries, back injuries particularly. And so how these players can then take care of themselves and their families after football is done.
I'm going to jump in here. We'll run out of time, but I want to really talk about the game itself. You and I had a long conversation yesterday, and we talked about the love of the game. We actually talked about the love of hitting, the love of making a tackle. Like the few times I got to tackle a quarterback,
exactly,
was really just a great feeling, and particularly a quarterback. You know, we weren't really fond of the quarterbacks. I'm just wondering, what do you think it is? I mean, clearly we're a violent country in a lot of ways. You know, just the game itself. I mean, I start thinking about Rams butting heads. You know, how it's kind of in our DNA, you know, to not only protect ourselves and some, you know, dealing with people who are different than us. We're evolving to be a better thing, but in the game of football, the violence is not going to go away. What do you recommend we do?
Well, I'm going to do a real quick history. The game came in 1869, Rutgers and Pittsburgh. First one. It's a combination of soccer and rugby. And then Walter Camp, who was the father of football, basically, he set in the rules about how to do the game. In 1900 to 1905, 45 college players were killed in this playing football, by the way. And so they had to clean it up. Basically, it got very violent, and so that was kind of the survival of the fittest was the idea then, this kind of social Darwinism that was the view. And we're the only country in the world that plays this game. It's got a massive theatric event now, as you see, with the millions and millions and millions of people plug into it. But it's the only, you know, worldwide, it's just Canada a little bit, you know, a little different game. But basically, we're the only country that plays football, basically. So when you look at the history and the militarism that is now in our country, you know, we have more expenditures in military expenditures than the next 20 countries in the world. So when we talk about football as a war game, it is a real world game because it's about violence, it is about hitting, but underneath that, there is this very almost special feeling about hitting somebody. And I think bulls coming together or people or whatever, that is very attractive. And players, Mike, you played, I played, we really like to play football and hitting people. So we have to really look at what's really real. And of course, you know, and the guys who are playing who are exceptional athletes, and they're now bigger, they're stronger. The weight training has been now for the next past 50 years. You know, every high school football team has a weight room. So that's what's going on. And so when we have to look at this game, it's all about, you know, going attacking the other team and get 6 points and defending, that kind of thing. So that's the game. So when we talk about it as a war game, the territorial defense and taking territory, that is the crux of the game, and as
right
as is war. And it's our this is our American game.
You know, we're running out of time. I just want to let people know that the game will continue. They're playing games now. They're trying
and it's an incredible game. It's a wonderful game, but there is damage that is associated with it. And even when we think about what we're doing now in the world, you know, and all the militarism that is with our country, I mean, you have to really think about this stuff.
Well, we're going to continue this discussion as long as you and I are alive.
I hope so.
I'm just telling people that, you know, the NFL now has games in Europe, and it has games in Mexico City.
Now.
It's trying to expand, and Dave Meggysey has been around the game a long time. He wrote a great book called Out of Their League, and that book is reported by Sports Illustrated to be one of the 100 best sports books ever. I recommend that everyone read it. Dave, we love you, and we'll be
talking. Baby. You love you, brother. And so let's keep. Yeah, if people are interested, you know, you can get it. You can contact me too through Mike, and because when you go Google it right now, you'll see all the things that happened with Damar, and there's a lot of people, you know, are concerned about it with grandparents and parents. Should my kid play this game? Because there's damage associated with this game. It's a violent game.
If people want to know, there's a guy named Matt Cheney who Dave turned me on to. We had him on the show, but he has a lot of details about concussions, injuries. Like he's a fanatic for the history.
Yeah, so there's a literature about that, or people want to get into it, and there's some really good writing about these issues because, you know, sports is reflected with a particular society, and United States society is reflected in football.
Okay, Dave, thanks a lot. We'll be talking to you soon. Everybody.